So when I left you last, we were kind of missing some data when we fetched it. So for example, when I click on random apartment here, and then go to edit, I can see the name of the apartment, but if I come over here, it tells me I have 0 price, beds, and guests. But if I were to actually fetch this data and see what the value is, it tells me that there's 1 bed, and that's not showing here. And the reason for that is we're actually just not fetching how many beds that user has. So we're using the view listing query, and this is inside of our controller and under modules. And you'll notice we're actually not even fetching data besides those 4 values and then the owner. So what I'm going to do is just add everything. So I'm going to copy this and just paste it in here. And I'm just going to get rid of what we have here because it's going to be included there. And now all I have to do is rebuild the controller. I'm going to say yarn build. And then if I refresh this page now, we should be fetching the beds. I guess that was cool house. This is random apartment. So guests should be 2. We see 2 guests. I click next. Here's a latitude and longitude 1, 2, which we see here as well. So it looks like we're now fetching the right data. So that's what I wanted to do there. Now the next thing, I kind of want to see the picture. So if I refresh this, I want to see the picture of what I'm doing and also be able to remove the picture if I want to. So to do that, I'm going to just hop back over here, and this is going to be in the shared drop zone field. So this thing is how we're controlling what's displayed right here. And if the user uploads an image, it's going to be available to us. So I'm going to wrap this in a div, and I'm just going to say image, and now the source is going to be value, which we can get from the field. So the current value of this field, and then it's in a value called preview. So this is something drop zone gives us. They create a preview that we can access and view. Now I only want to view this if the preview exists. So I'm going to say const picture URL is equal to value.preview. And now I'm going to say purl and image. So now I'm only going to render the image if the picture URL exists. So now in this case, oh, did I just crash it? Oh, because value is null. So I also need to make sure that value is not null. So let's go ahead and do value, then we can get that. Otherwise, picture URL is going to be null. Alright, so now when I upload a picture, I can then see the picture here. But random apartment already has a picture associated with it, so I want to also see that picture here before I even pick a new picture. So in that case, I just need to take another prop here, which is going to be the picture URL, and that's going to be a string. So in this case, we're going to show the value.preview, or if there's not a preview, the user hasn't selected a new picture, then we're going to show the picture URL. And the picture URL is coming from the props. I could just say props dot, or we could destructure it if we wanted to. And we need to make sure to do a comma. Now, because we're expecting a picture URL, we need to pass that in, and I'm going to make this an optional field. So in this case for us, that's going to be actually in our form. And now we actually don't accept a picture URL in our form quite yet, so I'm going to add that, picture URL, and I'm going to make that a string or null. So down here in my initial values, I'm going to say picture URL is equal to null. Oh, there's something else I forgot to do. So now that we added more values in our controller, we're going to have to rebuild the types. Because if we come over here, here's our edit. So I want to be able to pass in the picture URL now, because that's a valid value I can pass into the listing form, and it's happy. But take a look at this. So if I look at my listing here, you'll see that there's only a name, category, and picture URL that I'm getting, but I should be getting a whole bunch of other values. And the reason why there's a delay is just because the types have not been updated. So because we changed in our controller over here what the value of this query is, we need to regenerate the types for that query. So yarn gen types, and then we can just rebuild. Let's see what I did wrong. I didn't change the name of anything here. So it says tool error validation of GraphQL query document. And oh, it's because I have an anonymous one in view messages. Alright, so let's go over to view messages. We have an anonymous one here. I guess it's our subscription right here. So why don't I give that a name? New message subscription. Generate the types again. And alright, that looks like it worked. So now I'm going to say, oops, I want a yarn build. And if I come back over here, we don't need that anymore. And I'm going to restart the TypeScript server so it rereads the types. We should see the listing there. Yep, so now you see all the different types here, and it's accurately representing what we're fetching. So now that picture URL we're going to pass into the listing form. And now we just need to pass in our actual form here, that picture URL. So that's going to be in one of our pages. So we actually need to pass in a value. So this is a form value picture URL to our pages here. But you notice how we are kind of just rendering them there. So there's not a good way to access it. The other way we can access it is instead of taking it through a prop, is we can get it from the values itself. So in the form right here, we can have values, and this will give us all the values in the form. So I can say values.pictureURL to get that. And now it should display. Let's take a look. Did I crash the server, or is it just not working? No, it's just not working. So, oh, okay. My conditional is bad here. So what I really want to do is this. So let's wrap it like that. So what was happening is the value was null, so it wasn't even considering looking at the picture URL. Now I'm grouping it like this. So this whole entity could return null if the value does not exist. In that case, we want to consider looking at the picture URL. And now we can see this giant picture. And I'm just going to set a style on this. I'm going to say max height 200, max width. I'm just not even going to set a max width and see if it'll auto. I think it should auto get a width. There we go. And so now it's just not humongous. So now I can see the picture of this. The other thing, I want to be able to remove this because we add code on the back end to be able to remove stuff. So I'm going to add a button. I guess let's get the button from, what's it called? AntDesign. And then here I'm going to say remove. And then on click, what's going to happen is I want to make both these things, the picture URL and the picture null. So whenever we're setting two values, what we have to use is set values. And this is coming from the form. So set values. And now I'm going to keep all the current values. And then I'm going to say the picture URL is null and the picture is null. Alright, so now I can click on this remove button. It'll remove my picture. And now if I were to save the form, the picture should be gone. But that's what I want to do next. If we save it right now, I guess we can see what would happen for us saving it. So I think I add it to the console. I'm going to clear that. So here's what, this is coming from the edit listing connector. So we can see the picture and the picture URL are null. So when we save that to the database, we will no longer have a picture for this listing. But let's go ahead and do that part where we actually call the mutation now. So we're going to create a new controller here. And this is going to be called edit listing, or we could call it update listing, I suppose. Create an index file in there. And I guess the most recent one we did was this create message. And so we could use either the mutation component from React Apollo, or we could use the higher order component. Let's go ahead and do another one like this using the mutation component, because we haven't done a lot of those. Alright, so to start off, I want to just pass in the mutation. So I already have written that out in the playground over here. So that is this listing right here. So let's go ahead and copy that. Well, actually, before we even copy that, why don't we just say update listing mutation, and let's go ahead and create our variables that we want to pass in. So the listing ID here, and let me move this over, and that's going to be a string, and then the input, and the input is going to be, I forget what we called it. Was it so whenever I forget the name of this stuff, what I do is I just click on the schema, and then we can check out update listing, and we can see the type of it is right here. So update listing input. There we go. Okay, it just says it's never used. So now we're gonna use them. So listing ID, and then pass in an input. Perfect. So now I can copy that and plug it in. So I'm going to call this update listing mutation. I can get rid of the schema types there. I'm going to call this with update listing. And I guess I'm kind of mixing my names here. Why don't I call this update listing, since I'm calling everything in here update listing. And so this is going to be update listing. Again, we can just pass in the mutation function. That seems fine. Let's go ahead and create the types. So hop over to our command line, and we'll generate the types. Let's make sure I've saved this. I'm not sure I saved it, so I'm just going to rerun them. And now I can open up the schema, and now I can use them. So update listing mutation, and then the variables for it. So the data that we're going to pass back is going to be with update listing. Let's call this update listing. Actually, what did I call it? Create, yeah, I guess we can just call it update listing. And let's see what we need to do next. Let's pass in the same parameters we did above here, or the same types. Update listing, and I need to make sure to make this uppercase so it gets the type. And then the mutation is the one we just created here. Let's grab that. And then we're just going to pass the mutate down. So this is going to be create, or not create, but update. Alright, so this looks pretty good. And so now what we're going to do is just wrap this and then use this function that we passed down. So I'm going to say yarn build. And then I can use this in my website now. So in the edit listing over here, instead of passing the submit up here, I'm going to wrap this guy, and it's now going to use update listing. Oh, you know what? I forgot one thing. We need to add it to our index. That way we can actually import it. So modules, update, listing. Now we can build again. And alright, so finished. I can now use update listing. And now this is a rendered prop, so we need to make this a function now. It's happy, and here's the function, which is going to be update listing. And if we hover over it, we can see the type definition of it. Actually, I think we made it an object, yeah, so we have to destructure it there. And yeah, that looks right, so that's a mutation. So now in our submit, oops, we're going to get values. And now because we're using a lambda right here, we don't have to actually specify what the type is. It tells us what the type is automatically. And we can get rid of what we have here. So I'm not sure if we'll have to do any wiggling of the types to get it to work. Let's just go ahead and say update listing variables is going to be values. And you know what? I think we need to, right off the bat, do a similar thing to what we did with create listing. That's something I remember now. Is the values need to be, we need to change them because I think they're all strings. Oh wait, no, they're not. So we don't. I was thinking we would have to change the types of it, but the types look good here. Let's see what this is complaining about. Listing ID is missing. All right, let's add that. So values, listing ID, and I think, where do we get that from? Yep, we have that right there. So I can just pass it in like this. All right, and I think this is expecting this to be async. Make that async and we can await the result. And let's just log that so we can see whether it worked. And now we can see what else we have messed up here. All right, so sometimes this is hard to read, but usually I just scroll down to the bottom of these error messages and it usually is more specific at the bottom. So it says picture URL does not exist and you type that. And so what I need to do here is if we look at what I had, so I have something called input that I need to pass as a parameter. So I am not doing that right now. So that's our main problem, I think. So I'm going to say input is equal to values. And now it looks like the values map to the input well. So let's go ahead and don't think we need to do any building. Our server's still up. Let's go ahead and we can just submit this and see what happens. So random apartment here, the first thing I want to try is add a category. So this is an apartment description, super cool. So next page. Oh, we should probably rename that button. And let's see what happens here. All right, so the response was not successful. So I have no idea why the response is successful. So what I like to do is go to the network tab. Sometimes it gives you a better description of what's going on. And I'm going to clear it. And now when I click on localhost, we can see, and check it out, gave us a better one. So got invalid value. And if we look at the bottom, okay. So it says the field type name is not defined. So what's happening there is up here, we're passing in the type name. So I'm going to say type name is equal to that. And let's make it one longer. So, okay, so this is kind of interesting. So there is a type name here, but we didn't add it to our type definition. So it's actually not, it doesn't look like it's there. So it is there because we saw it over here. So type name is something that is automatically added. Apollo does that. So it's something we're passing into our form here. So when I do ... listing, it's passing in something called type name, which we don't really want in our form. So I can handle it up here or I can handle it down here. So the values is just the listing form values. I'm going to say const new values is equal to, or we can say, I guess values as any. I'm thinking what the best way to get this to work with TypeScript. Oh, I should do this above right there. And now that we have this as the type anything, it'll let me pluck off that value. So type name, and this is going to be ... actual values. I guess I should do values as any. That's better. There we go. And now let's do it like that. And I can, okay, I didn't have it up there. So one more. And we can call that new values. So new values is now what I want to pass in. So reason why I'm doing this is to just take this out. I don't want to pass type name to the input. Type name is what was messing it up and gave us that error. There's probably a better way to do it because we're getting kind of a bunch of these, but this is the easiest way that I know of right now. Alright, and the reason I had to cast this to anything is because type name is not in our type definition, and I'm thinking that just has to do with how CodeGen works. Alright, so, and maybe there is a way for us to include that in the type definition. So let's go ahead and try this again. And I'm just going to be like that so I can see if it works. And looks like it does, so if I refresh, we now see the values here are what I just typed out, so perfect. Now, looks like we messed up this thing here, the remove, and I think I know why that is, and that's because it's null. So come back over here to our listing form. The default value for the picture URL is null, though we never touched anything. We should have actually passed, oh, you know what, I know what we did. Check out this. If we hover, so I thought for a second that maybe we were removing the image, but we're not removing the image at all. But what we are doing is appending. So the way we're saving this to the database is we saved it with this. So this is what we saved to the database when we updated. And then we have some code in there to append this bit at the beginning. So what we needed to do is just to save this part here. So I guess we can add that to our front end pretty easily right before we submit. So let's go to our edit. So I'm going to pluck off picture URL here. So now I'm going to say if picture URL. So if it exists, I really want to just save this last bit here, the JPEG part. So I'm going to say const parts is equal to picture URL.split. I'm going to split by the slashes, and then I'm going to get the last part, which the last part we can just save back. So now picture URL is equal to picture URL, or sorry, not picture URL, parts.length -1. I'm not sure if it won't let us reassign. Yeah, because this is a read-only value. Let's do new values dot picture URL. There we go. It likes it if we do it like that. So now if we do have, and I think I can save it by just saving it here, so it's going to just pluck off the last value there. So let's see if I save this. I'm thinking it should fix the situation, and sure enough it does. So nice. So now if I just save the form, it doesn't mess up the picture because we're not saving that whole URL. We probably could have also put that logic in the back end if we wanted to, but I think it's fine there. So now I'm going to try removing this. Save that. Alright, it's gone. Let's try uploading a picture on update. Save it, and our picture's there. So awesome. So I think this is pretty good for the update for the listing and gives you an idea of how you can set that up. The picture, as you saw, makes it a little bit trickier, but the rest of the fields are pretty standard of how you do that, and they seem to be updating just fine. And so that is it for the listing part of updating. I see the other part of this is also the user, but it's going to be pretty much the exact same procedure. So I think we pretty much covered the user by doing the listing. If you're still needing help with the user, let me know in the comments below, and I can also do the user portion. But you should follow pretty much the same steps for setting up the user. So create a mutation for the user, updating it, and you're going to do the same thing, except one difference is if we hop back to our server code, we're not going to get a listing ID. So notice how we accept a listing ID. So for us, if you're updating the user's profile, you already know the user's ID based on the session. You don't need to have a parameter coming in there. So that's pretty much the only difference. The same thing applies. You'll add a button to be able to edit the user. You'll fetch the data using, for example, the me query. You'll fill out a form, and you'll pass in the initial values, and then you'll just call it the mutation at the end. So that's it for this video. Next video, we're going to get into caching.